Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co host, Mr. Kevin Hubers. This past weekend, we had the second London homestand event, and a bit of a craziness that we saw from there. A huge kind of not really upset since they didn't win in the end, but a big surprise in the Paris Legion making it all the way to a finals in that event. And so that's definitely going to throw a wrench into kind of some of the team's plans, more specifically Optic and Toronto. Is going to make their road to that eighth place all the harder come the final event of the year. Well, not final event, but final homestand event of the year in the Toronto home series that will be coming up this weekend. So, in this episode, we'll be diving into all the craziness that happened at the London homestand event, going over our predictions and the matches that occurred there, and then diving into our predictions for the final homestand event being the Toronto one. So, let's just jump right into this.
Yeah,
And in our
absolutely.
first matchup that we saw the Paris Legion taking on the Dallas Empire. The first matchup of the weekend was also the last matchup of the weekend, surprisingly enough. In this first matchup between the Paris Legion and the Dallas Empire took it in 3-1 fashion over the Legion. They took the Ramazda hard point 250 to 73. After that one, I honestly thought Dallas was just going to run away with that 3-0. And if they had, and they hadn't dropped the S&D Gunrunner 6-3, then they would have had a perfect weekend going 12-0. However, they do drop that Gunrunner S&D to the Paris Legion 6-3. After that, though, they wrap up the series taking Gunrunner domination 160 to 148, and St. Petrograd hardpoint 250 to 106. And couldn't read too much into this. Like the Dallas looked really hot in this matchup versus Paris Legion. However, that was to be expected. But if we're looking from this in a scope after the event, this is kind of like where Dallas started to heat up and just ran through the entire weekend, just bodying every other team that they've matched up against.
Oh yeah, no, they put every other team to sleep, including Florida, which was a huge deal. I mean, they played Paris twice, once in the very start of the event, and then once in the finals, and then they played Florida in the playoffs on Sunday, and
In the
then
semifinals.
yeah, in the semifinals, and then they played London in Group A winners, right? They played
If I'm
four.
correct, no, Dallas played New York.
Yeah,
Played New
that's right.
York.
That's right.
Yep.
They played New York. They played New York, which just won the last event. Florida won the last two events before New York's, and Paris, who was in the finals. Like, this is a really impressive run for Dallas. Kind of brings the question whether or not we should consider them in the the realm of S tier with Atlanta and Florida. This wasn't a good
I
event.
think after this event, I kind of just want to give Dallas S tier in their own and move Florida down to A tier with the likes of Atlanta and Chicago.
I think it might be a little too high praise right now, but they do look very very good.
I mean, we can kind of discuss that more so I think once we kind of dive into our predictions since a bunch of the top seeded teams are going to be at that last event of the year in Toronto. But definitely his first strong showing from Dallas in the first matchup against Paris. Pretty much to be expected. Both of us, I think we both actually had another perfect Friday in terms of predictions that we did. So these Fridays, we're getting them
We're
we're
getting pretty.
getting them solid. We're getting flawless Fridays. And then the Saturdays is just where everything turns topsy turvy in kind of what is occurring.
Yeah, no.
So
Well, I mean, I would hardly believe anybody if they said that Paris was going to be in the finals this event.
four people thought Paris would win the event. So
Well, there's some homers. Like that's the only explanation.
we know one of them was Zed's mom. So we need to find out who the other three are that have foreseen the prophecy, so to say. But
Right.
yeah, strong showing from Dallas in the first matchup, decent showing from Paris, and we'll see kind of them improve throughout the weekend and in the matches that we do see them playing. But the second matchup that we did see was the London Royal Ravens versus the Seattle Surge. And the London Royal Ravens took that 3-1 over the Seattle Surge. They took the first Azir hard point 250 to 167, They took the Arklov S&D 6-2. They lost the Hackney Domination 161 to 147. And then the St. Petrograd Hardpoint, they took, in air quotes, 250 to 77. In air quotes, because I
Right.
believe after the second hill or during the second hill in that hard point, Slacked lagged out of the game. And so Seattle had to play the rest of that matchup 4v5. And when you're playing a matchup 4v5 and some of your players aren't taking it seriously because they believe that they'll get a reset, that's kind of what is going to occur in the scoreline. It's going to be a bit of a blowout. So, moral of the story in this, if the game's not ended, it's still active and it can still potentially and will most likely count. So keep on trying your darndest until the match ends or the referees end the match themselves. So obviously this caused a lot of drama
Yeah.
on Twitter and players being frustrated. Obviously they're going to be frustrated, excuse me. I mean, it's kind of hard to control when your internet's spotty and when it isn't. Obviously you want a really good provider that's going to provide you with the service that you expect them to. However, every now and then you'll still kind of have it bite the bud and maybe lag out as kind of Slack did in the series. However, I do think that the ruling is justified, and I would like to kind of quote Adam Apicella on this, since he's kind of been a huge figure in the Call of Duty scene and was running the CWL and kind of competitive Call of Duty up until this year. And so with that, he kind of also agreed with the scenario in saying that, yes, it was, since it was a player issue, it was his internet, it was Slack's internet that failed him, and so he lagged out, that they should not be awarded a restart. And the reasoning being is because if you kind of have this ruling where, okay, if a player legs out and it's not anything to do with kind of the equipment or the services that the CDL is providing, then a player could honestly just unplug their PlayStation and keep on like just forcing these restart scenarios, which obviously breaks competitive integrity. And
Right.
so, since there's no way of proving that and disproving that or stopping that from happening, this is kind of the scenario that we're left in, is where if it's a player related issue, whatever it may be, they lag out, it's on them and they will not be awarded a restart. And so it is incredibly unfortunate because it's relatively outside of the player's control, but it is the fairest and kind of most direct and certain way of ensuring that integrity is upheld in kind of these scenarios. And I think the CDL has been pretty straightforward in their rulings. They haven't really been flimsy or flexible on kind of their rulings. It's all been kind of straight and narrow and consistent from them in what's going to be awarded a reset and what's not. So I think it's just honestly is a lot of the kind of players adapting to somewhat more of a flexible rule set that we had in the past in previous titles to this more kind of inflexible black and white kind of rule set that the CDL has for these matches.
Yeah, I agree, sort of. I mean, I'm still not ever gonna be on board with the fact that it like players should be punished for the fact that game lagged out or something. And I think in certain situations it would make sense to have like a restart to a match or something like that if in the event that happens. I mean, after all, like you know, if when it comes to champs or anything like that, $2 million on the line for a top prize, I'm gonna be upset if I lose that because my internet decided to go bad. Like, I just it just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I mean, the solution in my eyes is really simple. Like, the team should just have a central location like Chicago and, do everything from there. And that seems to work fine. You never hear Chicago complain about internet problems or anything.
Yeah,
So,
I think that would have been like great. I mean, it's obviously the ideal scenario is for all the players to kind of be at their team facility or whatnot if they're allowed to. But at the start of the year, certain teams like in the contracts, it was you're going to have to live here, you're going to have to come to the facility every day, and this is kind of how things are going to work. And a lot of players did not like that concept, and so some teams did not enforce that. I believe one of those being Seattle. I do not believe Seattle has a facility, and so their players can live wherever the heck they want inside of the United States or even Canada or wherever. And it certainly has not helped them in the long run, as you can kind of see.
Yeah, I mean, internet issues, like an organization should be taking care of that. That shouldn't be on the players. That's silly to expect a bunch of 19-year-olds to make sure that their internet is perfect. I mean, they aren't equipped to handle this kind of situations in all honesty, and they really need to just lean on the fact that you have these multi-million-dollar organizations that are willing to spend $25 million to get into the CDL and then refuse to build some sort of practice facility. Like, I don't know how many small businesses are formed under, I don't know, even like $100,000, but they all seem to have a physical location or at least some semblance of like, hey, this is a work area. I mean, I think that it's easy for us to be like, oh, well, it's kind of a video game or whatever, but I mean, this is genuinely work, and it needs to be respected more like work. You don't see the NFL having problems with connectivity or anything like that because they spend the money to make sure that the entertainment value is kept. And that's just the entertainment side. The game's still being played. You have whole organizations that have decided, hey, we're going to take this seriously. I mean, they even choose what the guys eat and all that stuff. I don't think it should go that far because there's no real sense in it. But I mean, you also need to make sure that your players are getting taken care of. And time after time again, the reigning factor that kind of unifies all of them is the fact that the players aren't being taken care of. So that's my 2 cents on it anyway. I think that the league could be as strict as they want to be if there was some semblance of uniformity throughout all of the leagues, but there's not, and I don't know if there ever will be.
Yeah, well, what do you mean by kind of uniformity? Because I feel like the league has been pretty uniform in
No,
their
not
in their
not the
decision
league. The
making of these
organizations need
scenarios.
to be more uniform in
Oh,
how they handle everything. No, the
okay.
league has been consistent at best. I think they do a decent enough job, and it's easy for the players to just blame them for problems that aren't really the league's problems. The league shouldn't be held accountable for players' internet. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it should be the organizations that are held accountable. Same thing with the fines that we talked about last week, and are especially true today. You would not have something like Octane going off if his org had to pay a big old fine because of it.
Yeah, and I will quote Adam Apicella here. I kind of paraphrased what he was saying, but
No.
word for word, the situation is terrible, but you can't set a precedent of starting over a match in hardpoint due to non-game related bugs. The room to game the system would be absolutely catastrophic. And so I think the ideal scenario here, outside of just not having your internet cut out, is we had the pause feature on LAN, and I don't know where that's gone. I know I can boot up a custom game of League of Legends right now, invite whoever I want to the to the lobby, have it private. We can have 4 spectators in it plus all 10 players, 5 for each team or whatnot. And if someone drops out of the game or disconnects, anyone in there can pause it, and then once that guy gets back in, we can unpause the game. It's not that difficult to do. If Riot's had that, I don't know how many years, but I've been playing since I think around season 3, and that's been in there since season 3, so it's been in there for at least 7 some years. I don't understand how that technology hasn't made its way over to Call of Duty yet, but it's a little bit absurd, especially since we do have these custom lobbies now, these dedicated server lobbies. I don't understand why that isn't a thing.
Right.
And that would literally solve the majority, if not all, of the issues and complaints these players are having.
Well, I think the other issue is that you can't rejoin a game state if your internet goes out. So,
If
um,
your internet goes out, you can't rejoin the lobby. Well, they should make it so you can rejoin it, is kind of the thing.
right. I don't disagree with that, but that would be another like very revolutionary thing that is entirely on the game developers. And we've already seen like how little they're willing to give to
Yeah,
competitive in the first place.
it's for like a private lobby though, so I don't even think it would be like that crazy or difficult to do. You just need like kind of the lobby name and the password or whatever. But
Right.
I don't know. It's a little outside of my area of software engineering expertise. It's more kind of networking and
Right.
whatnot, network engineering, which is certainly outside of my field of expertise. But if
No, I think
Riot Games has had it for 7 years, I can easily, like, it should be incredibly easy for Infinity Ward and Treyarch and Activision to bring it over to whatever system they have in place, in my eyes. But like that's kind of a side topic, but either way, a pause feature, being able to rejoin the lobby if someone disconnects, that would solve a lot of these issues. And definitely going forward, if we're looking at having an online league potentially long term, depending on how long it takes for the world to get rid of COVID or whatever,
right.
get us out of this pandemic, we could be seeing an online league next year, in all honesty. And so that's definitely something that they're going to need to incorporate if they want to have the fairest possible league, or a league that has kind of competitive integrity in its as a cornerstone.
Right.
So, but that was kind of all the craziness with the Seattle match. They just kind of love having these unfortunate scenarios. But yeah, London takes that 3-1 over the Seattle Surge, and they move on to Saturday. All the teams are on Saturday, but they move on to Saturday in the winners bracket. So the match after that, we had the New York Subliners taking on the LA Guerrillas. The New York Subliners took that in convincing fashion, as we kind of all believed they should have. They took the Gunrunner hard point 250 to 126. They took the St. Petro S&D 6-4, and then they took the Hackney Domination 167 to 131. Not too much really of interest there. New York Subliners have been really consistent, and LA Guerrillas have not been. They had kind of one good event showing. First time they made that roster change, moving in Saints over. Oh, good. I can't even remember his name. Spart, moving
Spart,
Saints
yeah.
in over Spart. But since then, they haven't really shown much of anything. Moving on to a much more interesting and an incredibly contested matchup was the Florida Mutineers versus Optic Gaming. Now, this was the first look we had of Optic Gaming's new roster, which include Draza and Hollow instead of Dashi and Chino. And it went all the way to a Game 5, Round 11. In the end, Florida took it. Thankfully, for, I guess, our predictions. Don't have like stock in any of these teams or whatever, but I want to be right in my predictions, so I'm
Right.
happy that Florida won it for that reason only.
Everybody wants to be right.
And Florida took the first hard point on Ramasa, 250 to 177. Optic took the Gunrunner S&D 6-4. Florida Mutineers took St. Petro Dom in really convincing fashion. They took that 183 to 120. They're incredibly strong St. Petrograd Dom, so that's to be expected. Optic Gaming fired back though on St. Petro Hardpoint, taking that 250 to 187. And then Florida Mutineers were able to clutch up in a Piccadilly S&D, taking that 6-5 over Optic Gaming. What is your opinion on this new Optic Gaming roster? We will see later on that Florida kind of get bodied by Dallas.
Right.
So with that in mind, kind of what is your opinion on Optic, on this new Optic roster? Do you think they're the real deal, or do you think that this was just Florida having an off or bad event, which we haven't seen from them yet with this new lineup that they have had for about a month now or so?
So Florida did come out and say that they had been taking it easy in practice and everything in the past couple weeks, you know, resting on their laurels, rightfully so. I mean, like, if I was in that situation, yeah, I mean, like, I would feel like I deserved a little break. You know, you don't want to like. The concern is that like, yeah, you go hot too early and then you know you die out. You know, that's what we talked about. So I think that because Florida decided to take a little bit of time off, this is probably going to be beneficial to them. But right now, it's not going to look beneficial because they are, in fact, like not going to win this tournament if you don't practice. Plain and simple. Like if you don't practice, you're not going to win. So they did exceedingly well, considering that they did take a very relaxed approach to practice.
Looking at kind of the maps too that they played, not saying that they played bad maps for themselves. I don't think that at all. They definitely played kind of their map set. But the maps that they did play are actually no, not really. Kind of looking at it again, I was going to say maybe the S&D maps were more kind of optic favored or ones that they preferred, but they really weren't. I was kind of thinking that they were remembering back to kind of some of the maps that Optic had played. However, the record on Piccadilly is 0-3, so that certainly wasn't. And then they just picked up their first Gunrunner S&D win this weekend over Florida. They were 0-4 on that prior, so can't really say that it was a bad matchup for Florida. So it's just really kind of Florida coming into this event with a bit of a laxed attitude, and this new Optic Gaming roster kind of showing up and demonstrating that they are not a bottom of the pack team. However, we said that over about the Gorillas lineup after they brought in Saints, and the past two events they've been 0-3, 0-3, and they're out pretty much.
Right.
So could be very interesting to see how this Optic Gaming roster performs at the Toronto event, who they'll be facing in their first matchup. But that was the Optic versus Florida Mutineers match. Moving on to our first Saturday matchup, we saw the Dallas Empire take on the New York Subliners, and Dallas Empire took this 3-0 over the New York Subliners. They took the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 219, took Arclov S&D 6-4, and then they took Gunrunner Dom 155 to 130. And the thing that really is worrying me about New York is on today, well, not today, but on the Saturday, which is the day we're discussing, they went 0-6 map count. Now, that's not what worried me. What worries me is they're not winning any DOMs outside of Hackney.
Right.
They played Gunrunner, I believe, twice this weekend, and they lost both times. The only hardpoint they did win was a Hackney. They only have one domination map that they're good at. Gunrunner, they're 3-9 on, and we know that they're always banning St. Petrograd. So
Right.
all teams really need to do is not be crap at Gunrunner Dom, and then they can just ban Hackney Yard, and they at least get one map on New York and can extend that series. And as we saw, as we'll see, I guess I should say, in an upcoming match, that's exactly what you kind of need, is that solid game 3. You need
Right.
that swing game mode to be in your favor, potentially shift the momentum, extend the series out, or go up 2-1 against the team. So that, I think, is going to be the biggest weakness for this New York lineup moving into champs. And it's kind of the one thing that's keeping me from saying that they're an A-tier team in the mix with kind of Chicago, Atlanta, Florida, and then Dallas, like all of those teams. It's what's keeping me from putting New York kind of in the mix with them. And it has been kind of what's been keeping them out of that conversation, I
Right.
do think. Because the prior weekend, the one they won, they played 5 Hackney Yard Doms. They only played Hackney Yard Dom. It was the only domination they played. So I don't know if teams really just kind of wanted to get a read on them in that map and mode that weekend or what, but it's seeming like if you want to extend the series against New York, you just got to ban Hackney Yard Dom. They're going to ban St. Petro, and you're going to end up on Gunrunner. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's plain and simple. I mean, when you only give people 3 maps to choose from, you're only good at one. You got to be good at two. Plain and simple. I mean, there's nothing else that you can do besides literally get good at 2 maps.
yeah,
Otherwise, you're
especially moving into kind of champs and like what the grand finals will be, where you're playing 8 maps, 2 of which are going to be Dom.
right. Well, I mean, if you're not good at Dom, your chances are you're probably not going to go. You're probably not going to go very far in champs. I mean,
Yes,
if you
but
physically
there
can't
are going to be
win,
teams at champs that I think can make it far, such as this New York lineup, that don't have a complete map set, that don't have a comfortable or an extended enough map pool that they'll be able to actually kind of win it in the end. But that's a discussion, I guess, for when we start talking about who can potentially win champs, which will be a later episode. But all right, we're going to. You still there?
yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. I was worried that we got disconnected or something, but all
No, no,
right,
no, no,
cool.
no.
We're
We're good.
still
We're good.
good.
We're
We're
good,
gonna move
everybody.
on to the Florida Mutineers versus the London Royal Ravens. Oh, the matchup was right afterwards, where we're gonna see how important that Game 3 domination is. So the Florida Mutineers, they come out and they destroy the London Royal Ravens on a 0 hard point. They took that 250 to 129, and then they take the Piccadilly S&D 6-3. Now this was like the first domination that London has won in a long time. And it was St. Petrodome, which is Florida's best domination map. And they took it 163 to 157. And that right there flipped the switch for London Royal Ravens and allowed them to pull off the reverse sweep against the Florida Mutineers, who we were currently saying was the undoubtable best team in the game.
Yes.
They take the Gunrunner hard point 250 to 207, and then they close it out taking the Arklov S&D 6-5. Going into this matchup, the Florida Mutineers were 9-1 on St. Petro domination. They only have 2 losses on it, and one of them is to the London Royal Ravens, who have the worst, not the worst, but one of the worst domination records in the league at 9-17. It's a
Pretty
huge
embarrassing.
win for the London Royal Ravens right there.
Oh,
The
yeah, no,
worst
for sure.
domination team in the league is undoubtedly the LA Gorillas, rocking a crispy 3-18 record
Jeez.
in domination.
I mean, there is a lot of teams that have complained about domination from the get-go, and I mean, there's a reason why they complain. It's because it's a very hard game type to win. You know, it favors a lot of things that aren't traditionally good for Call of Duty. So
So the London Royal Ravens pull off the major upset against the Florida Mutineers and move on to Sunday as a first seed. So London really showed up, I guess you could say, at their home event. Unfortunately, they did not make the finals again at a home event, losing out, as we will see eventually, to the Paris Legion. But a really good matchup there, or match against Florida there for them. I'm going to move on to our first losers bracket match of the Saturday, which was the LA Gorillas versus the Paris Legion. The Gorillas, they take the first hard point on Ramazda, 250 to 226. Then the Paris Legion obliterate the Gorillas on Arklov S&D 6-0. And this is something that's kind of interesting. So Paris, they talked about all the research they did going into this event. And I think a lot of that research had something to do with S&D. Because if we go over to their S&D record this weekend, they went 5-1 in S&D this weekend. The only S&D they lost was to Dallas in the grand finals. But before that, they were flawless. They went 5-1 in search this weekend. So that research definitely paid off for them. And that was kind of what was really winning them this series. They went to a couple of game 5s throughout this weekend. I mean, you look at their domination record, they were 2-3 in dom. So they weren't positive in domination. And then hardpoint, they were also not positive in that. They went 3-5 in hardpoints. So it was really, they made it all the way to the finals on the back of their stellar S&D play this weekend. And so that's kind of like why you hear that saying S&D wins championships.
It does.
It's the thing that, it's the game mode that is the easiest to kind of prepare for, in all honesty, in my eyes. See people's setups a lot more.
Oh yeah, I mean, you
It's
could be like,
round based.
oh hey, by the way, you know, they tend to favor A on this map more than they favor B. All right, well, you know, let's just make sure that even if we feel like they're gonna go B, we still have like 2 guys at A. You know, just hedging your bets. And it's really easy when that's 50-50. Hard point, on the other hand, it can be a little bit more confusing. You have to figure out when people are going to rotate, and Dom's kind of Dom's a mess, so we won't talk about Dom.
Yeah, but it's always exciting kind of watching S&Ds as the season gets closer to the end because teams are pulling out kind of more and more tricks out of the playbook, especially at champs. You kind of see just playbook being wide open, the pages ripped out and thrown into the air. But Paris Legion, after that extremely strong Arklov S&D from them, they take the St. Petro Dom 197 to 124. And then they barely won the St. Petro Hardpoint 250 to 243. So honestly, the Gorillas, they should have won that St. Petro Hardpoint. They got absolutely IW'd in the spawns
Oh yeah,
on
for
that
sure.
map to kind of to lose it. And so it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if this had gone to a game 5. But with kind of the S&D prowess that we were seeing from the Paris Legion, and kind of honestly, we haven't really been seeing the Gorillas perform well in S&D these past 2 events that we've seen them in. So, and that was their best game mode by a mile, and still is their best game mode by a mile. So if they're not winning S&Ds, that's incredibly worrying for them.
Definitely, definitely. If you'll notice, though, yeah, the
Yeah.
Gorillas have been like in the beginning of the season they were a lot worse, or a lot better at search, and it seems like something's kind of fallen off since then. But
They were
um,
even good throughout kind of the middle, maybe not the middle of the season, but after they made kind of that roster change, they were still doing really solid. I mean, there was the one weekend where I believe they went 5-1 in search, but these past 2 events have definitely not been pretty.
oh yeah, no, absolutely not. Part of it's probably due to the meta change. I don't think it's favorable for players like Blast, but I mean, we'll see.
It might also be that they might have shown their hand a bit too early, or maybe they went back into the lab and they're scheming up some new concoctions in Search and Destroy, and they're just not ready to show it yet. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it at champs. But moving on to our other losers bracket matchup, it was Optic Gaming versus the Seattle Surge. Optic Gaming took this in 3-1 fashion over the Seattle Surge, as we both predicted. They took the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 223. They took the St. Petro S&D 6-1. They lost the Hackney Dom 173 to 149, and they won the Hackney Hardpoint 250 to 140. If anything, even though the Seattle Surge, they're 11th overall for the season, that's where they're going to end. They've been to 9. They're not going to be at Toronto. Or actually, wait, they are going to be at Toronto. So
Wait,
the
London?
Gorillas are last place overall, 12th.
Yes,
Gorillas are guaranteed 12th.
yes.
Surge, they're not guaranteed 11th, but more than likely they're going to end up 11th. However, the one thing that is not rank 11 for that team is their domination. They're actually a pretty good domination team, bearing all their other match records. Their hard point, they're 12-25. Their S&D, they're 8-20. Domination, they're 13-8. And they got a 7-1 record on Gunrunner Dom. So, they got that going for them, but not much else.
It'll come with time.
What will come with time? They don't have much time left.
Right, but that's what you said, right? Was it'll come with time? Apparently, it's gonna click for Seattle.
Oh, yeah. I said this team would be top 5 by the end of the year. I was wrong. I was wrong. I am sorry, but I was dead wrong. Okay? I thought they would keep the roster together and they would be able to improve and be top 5 by the end of the season. However, Enable's not on the roster anymore. Karma retired, and they brought in Proto and Pander. And their mindset's really, really bad right now because they've been plagued by a bunch of issues throughout the season.
Issues. Is that what we're gonna call them?
Putting it politely. But gonna move on to maybe, I guess, a more depressing note if you're a New York fan, which was the Paris Legion versus New York Subliners matchup, which New York lost 3-0. Did not see that one coming. Did not see that one coming. They lost the Ramazda Hardpoint 250 to 242. They lost the St. Petro S&D 6-2, which is their best S&D map, I do believe. Well, their second best S&D map. Their best one was Ramazda. They're 7-2 on that. And St. Petro, they were 6-1 on that prior to losing to the Paris Legion. So Paris, yeah, their research, it really did pay off. We'll just say that. And then
Yeah,
the
well,
Gunrunner domination,
here's
I
the
guess got
issue
to
though
play
with
New
the
York on
research, right?
Gunrunner.
He-
They were kind of doomed there. They lost that 170 to 137. So, Paris, what do you know? Researching team strategies and search and destroy really does pay off. Who would have guessed it?
It'll pay off now, but I
And
mean, a lot of the strats are already being conserved for champs. Like, like there's only going to
yes,
be so
yeah,
many
that is
things.
true.
There's only going to be so many things that are.
And this event for New York, it did somewhat matter. I think they want to keep that fifth seed. They definitely don't want to move out of top. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter if they move out of top 6 since they're still going to end up playing. They don't really get an elevated position, but I think they definitely want to keep that fifth place position, and only getting a one win on this weekend gives Minnesota the opportunity to actually pass them in the standings, be it a small opportunity, but it still gives them kind of a glimmer of light to move into that fifth place position. So I think New York definitely wanted to maybe at least perform a bit better than they did at this event. Going to move on to our last Saturday matchup that we had, which was the Florida Mutineers versus Optic Gaming LA. And this time around, it did not go to a game 5. Thank you, Florida Mutineers, for not killing me. Mazda Hardpoint, Optic Gaming LA took 250 to 239. And I believe they actually got outslayed pretty heavily on that map. I do believe. I'm going to go over to the stat line for that one. And yeah, on that Ramasta Hardpoint, Optic Gaming got outslayed by 11 kills. So a
Dang.
decent scoreline. I guess Ramasta is one of those more extremely rotation heavy maps where you're kind of just going a full 60 on one hill and then 0 on the next, but not really too worried. But just a little tidbit of information on that Ramasta Hardpoint some people might find interesting. After that, though, Florida Mutineers ran away with the series. Took Gunrunner S&D 6-3, relatively comfortable there. Really close Hackney domination, however. They took that 157 to 154. The end of that got extremely crazy, but Florida Mutineers were able to clutch up at the end there. And then they took the Azir hard point afterwards, 250 to 178. So Florida Mutineers move on as the second seed to face Dallas. And this was a matchup that you actually had as your finals. I had New York versus Florida as my finals. However, I was incredibly wrong with that one. But yeah, we're getting the predicted finals matchup in the semifinals. And it was a pretty disappointing semifinal matchup
Yeah.
between those two teams, as we'll discuss right now. Florida Mutineers versus Dallas Empire on Sunday. Dallas absolutely cooked the Florida Mutineers. They decided to have some nice calamari for breakfast that day. The Gunrunner Hardpoint, they took that 250 to 164. The Piccadilly Search, they took 6 to 1. And the Hackney Dom, they took 176 to 152. So wasn't even really close for the Florida Mutineers.
Right. I don't disagree at all. That was pretty pitiful on Florida's behalf. To be so ahead. I'd imagine they would have done better this weekend, but I mean, what do I know?
Yeah, that matchup against Dallas, Awakening definitely had a really bad series. I mean, you just look at the first hard point that they played. He went 19 and 32. And that's kind of the first time that we've seen Awakening underperform or not perform well in a matchup. And so I don't think we're going to see that again. It might just be kind of that one-off thing, or maybe it was just that Dallas just knew how to shut them down or whatnot. They knew how to kind of play that Florida matchup. We'll definitely see kind of later at champs, since I do see those teams probably matching off. And actually, we're going to see this matchup, I believe, at the Toronto event. I think they might play in pools against each other in the first on Friday. So we're definitely going to see a pretty quick rematch of these two teams. But moving on to the semifinal, that was not a disappointment. It was the Paris Legion versus the London Royal Ravens. London Royal Ravens took the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 203. They lost the Arklov S&D 6-5. They won the St. Petro domination 179 to 131. And then Paris took the Hackney Hardpoint 250 to 173. And the Gunrunner S&D 6-5. Now, this series, a lot of it was London Royal Ravens choking in the S&D. They kind of blew it on the Arcloth search, and they definitely blew it on the Gunrunner S&D. I believe they were up 5-3 or 5-4 in that Gunrunner S&D, and I saw Shawnee shoot a body, and as soon as that, I said, I looked over to my brother and said, well, London, they just lost this series. It's going to Paris. And lo and behold, they did lose it after that. So what is the lesson that we learned from this series? Don't shoot bodies.
Don't shoot bodies. I don't know. I don't know. So,
it's bad luck.
It is bad luck. Before the game's over, you probably shouldn't be shooting bodies because it's gonna come back to get you. The other thing that was really interesting in that, and the only stat that I'd bothered to even remember for this podcast, was that right there made London 1-7 in Game 5s. Talk about choke artist of the season. London Royal Ravens, you probably...
That actually makes them the worst Game 5 team. Like, before then, it was Dallas. Like, Dallas is notoriously bad in Game 5s, but geez. Yeah, London takes the cake.
Yeah, they definitely do. It's definitely a pandemic of a problem over in London is choking hazards because they have not figured it out in Game 5. Being a great S&D team and all, they just, I guess they don't have, they can't go the distance. They get a little tired. I couldn't tell you. But, I mean, the pressure's too much for them in the series as they fall to the Paris Legion. Oh, my God. I can't even get over that.
Yeah, so
I can't even get over that. The finals.
We're going to have the Paris Legion in the grand finals against the Dallas Empire, and they got destroyed.
Yeah, I mean...
It was a swift 3-0 for the Dallas Empire over the Paris Legion. Hackney Hardpoint 250-145. Gunrunner S&D 6-1, and Gunrunner Domination 167-134. After this weekend, the Dallas Empire is 100% the best search and destroy team in the game. Maybe not BAP win to loss record, but definitely by round win percentage since this weekend. Let's just look at it because it's a beautiful stat line.
Oh my gosh.
For the Dallas Empire. Perfect in the hard points, a perfect 5-0 hard point record. They had an almost perfect S&D record. They went 3-1 in S&D, only dropping one to Paris Legion on Gunrunner earlier in the event on that Friday. They lost that 6-3, and then they came back and won 6-1. And they went flawless in domination, a perfect 4-0. So the Dallas Empire are now 20-10 in domination. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's insanity.
And they're scary on 2 maps as well, which is good for them.
I mean,
St. Petrograd, they are 2-3 on. They've only played that a handful of times, but Gunrunner and Hackney, Gunrunner they're 7-4 on, and then Hackney they're 11-3. So I think they might be the best Hackney yard Dom team in the game. I think maybe New York is like the only one that can. Well, New York's 10-8, but like in recent times,
they've been
might be the only one that can kind of really contest that.
Post Mac, they've been really, really good. So I mean, it comes down to one simple reason why Dallas has been so good at Dom. It's because Grandpa Clayster is the only one old enough to play Dom in a Call of Duty prior to, and Crimsix.
Crimsix has played Dom.
So, like...
He played during Ghost.
I mean, at that level, you kind of understand. Like, you've probably seen it all a time or two. So, being an on-field commander, like, Clayster definitely is. And the same with Crim to a degree.
Shout out... Sorry to cut you off.
You're fine.
Shout out to Crimsix this event. He actually... Well, I'll bring up the stat line because Crimsix did good. And if Crimsix is doing good and everyone else is like, their stat line actually might be one of the best overall team KDs that we have ever seen at an event. You had Clayster at a 1.23, Crimsix at a 1.15, Hook at a 1.25, Illy at a 1.2, and Shotzi at a 1.29.
Yeah, that sounds...
Their average KD as a team was a 1.22. What?
Yeah, it's pretty filthy.
That's absurd.
Pretty filthy.
The
Um,
team that made the finals, the Paris Legion, every single one of their players was below a 1.0.
all of
Their
them went
average
negative.
TKD was a point 0.9. How did they make the
I,
finals?
I'm I'm as lost as you are. I have no
The reason
idea.
they made the finals is literally because of their S&D.
Right.
That's the only reason they made the finals is because they're S&D, because they were not doing that amazing in their respawn game modes.
Oh yeah, no.
And
I
I
mean,
mean,
I don't think anybody on Paris has the same kind of gun skill that any of these other teams have. I I'll
it's
flatly I'll
actually crazy that New York got 3-0 swept out of this tournament so fast because like you look at their KDs, they're not bad.
Oh
Like their
yeah, no.
matches were close, but it's still crazy to think that they lost with kind of the stat lines that they have.
I
I
mean,
mean,
you can't really
accuracy was at a 1.01, attach a 1.09, Mac 0.96, temp 1.02, and Zuma 0.9. Like that's like a stat line you could see in the finals.
that's average. I would say that's average. I don't think that's something you might see it in the finals because
I mean, compared to everyone else this weekend, though, I think they might have the third best team KD at the event. Like just looking
potentially.
at everything, I think actually no, London probably, yeah, London and Florida tie at a 1.08 for team KD. But after that, yeah, New York was the fourth best. And I was actually really kind of hoping TJ went below a 1.75. Not because I'm a dick, but because of the trash talk that occurred between him and Easy Mac, and TJ obviously making it like personal because he can't take criticism or he can't take like
He's a kid.
sarcastic remarks or whatever.
He's a kid.
He ended at a, I mean, come on. He's old enough that he doesn't have to like make
He's
stuff personal when people are just
he,
joking on Twitter.
he's a
But
kid. Like that's
he's not a
first of
kid.
all, you
He's a
can't.
grown man. He's like what, 20 years
y-
old or something?
I don't.
You can't call a
I
20-year-old a kid.
I can call a 20-year-old a kid. Um, because I know when I was
You're the
20, I
same
used to.
age as me. If
Right.
I'm not calling him a kid, you do not have the
It,
ability to call him a
no,
kid.
because he is. Like the mentality is different there. I mean, like it's very
His
obvious.
mentality is certainly that of a child,
Well,
but him
so
himself is not.
okay, yeah. So he's an oversized man child. Whatever. Like I think
All
you're
right, yeah.
missing the mark here. Is I mean, he does like a lot of these guys do very childlike things on Twitter because a lot of them are still very young, and it's hard to like we want to take them into the same regard as we would other professional sports players, but at the end of the day, yeah, a lot of these guys are kids. They need agents, they need managers, they need stuff, they need players that or sorry, they need like an organization around them that's going to be able to support them. And I don't feel like in a lot of cases that's that's what's happening. So if you're not getting that support that you need, then you're gonna end up doing things like this, and dropping out. And I mean, it's been a weird season for this because I'm sure that it might have been different as time went on, but I think moving forward, they definitely need to like reconsider a lot of the things and prepare for this a lot better because I mean, the whole you can live wherever you want and just be good for LAN tournaments. I mean, that's not even a good plan in the first place. Like you still need these guys to have top tier internet so that way it's as close to LAN as possible. I mean, and if they're in person, then they can do LAN tournaments, and you can find AM teams in the area that want to, help them scrim on LAN or whatever, right? But don't come to me and tell me that like these players' actions are inexcusable or they like at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are just kids. Like Octane lashed out because he's like a 21, 22-year-old guy, and he's like, I'm really fed up with not winning the money and not winning games. He's a competitive guy. All these guys are. So like they've got egos to them. They're very dramatic, and it just makes for good entertainment. Usually, every other Sunday or so, always something we're always talking about. But at the end of the day, like I said, these guys are all kids. Like they need organization and they need management to make them not do stupid stuff. So my 2 cents. I'll keep saying that. That's my fix to the league. It's not a fix to the league. It's a fix to the orgs in the league that spent $25 million just to watch some 19-year-old piss it all away with a tweet. So, like, anyway,
Yeah,
my 2 cents.
but TJ, he ended up the weekend at a .82. Didn't make it to the .75,
Yeah, but I mean, a
unfortunately.
.82 is still terrible.
It is still terrible. And
Like TJ Haley
the
sucks. We've established this for a long time. Like, this
I
Modern
do
Warfare
want
is not his
to
game.
give props to Draza and Hollow though. They definitely, I think, performed like even though they were only at a .9, a .91, and a .9 on the dot, respectively. They definitely had some good and impressive plays throughout the weekend. So
No,
that
I think they
Optic
did great.
Toronto matchup, I think, will be a very interesting and exciting one to watch. And kind of those two teams are going to be very interesting to kind of watch throughout the weekend as we'll discuss our predictions going into that Toronto event because Optic, they're at 80 points, Toronto is at 7 points, and because Paris made it all the way to a finals, they are now at 100 points. So Optic's going to need to get 2 wins to move past them, since I believe if they're tied in CDL points, it goes to their map win to loss record. And I think Optic might be tied with them there if they go 2-1 on the weekend. And so then I believe it will go to their game win to loss record, which they will have a better win to loss record than them. So Optic wins 2 games on the weekend, they'll move up into that 8th place spot. Toronto, on the other hand, I believe need to win 3 potentially, or they might need to win 4, depending on kind of how that tiebreaker works out. But that's definitely going to be one to watch, as well as kind of one of the entire groups, as I think going to shift the conversation
No, it's fine.
over to that event. And I'll bring it up right now for our predictions. The first matchup that we are going to have on that weekend, probably not the first matchup that will be
Yeah, you
broadcast,
always
but the
mess that
first
up.
matchup, whatever, Chicago versus Seattle. Realistically, I think we're all saying, yeah, Chicago should take that over Seattle, no problem. This tournament means realistically nothing to Chicago since they're not moving up into 8th. It's impossible for them unless
Right.
they go flawless. And even then, I don't know if they can make it simply because of the way tiebreakers work. So this event means absolutely nothing for Seattle. They might like it to get 9th so that their first matchups against the Gorillas, but even that's going to be incredibly difficult. So Seattle, for this event, I think they entirely need to look at it as practice for champs, because it is
God,
not
they need
going
it.
to change their
God,
fate
they need it.
significantly enough
They
that
absolutely need
warrant
practice.
them showing kind of all the tricks that they have or could possibly conjure up in the week that they have. But yeah, so Chicago 3-1 over Seattle. Don't really see that going. Like if that's an upset, I'm done. I'm literally done. But moving on to a more interesting and exciting match is going to be Toronto versus OGLA. And this is going to be very interesting. We saw a really good look out of this OGLA squad at this prior event, and there's only a week in between them. So there's not a lot of time for change. With that being said, Toronto, they got to look at this new OGLA roster. And so I'm going to put a little stock into that, just enough so that I'm actually going to give Toronto the win here over OGLA 3-2. I
Really?
see you going OGLA 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I like to say TJ Haley sucks, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, Toronto's been looking a lot better recently, but Hollow and Draz are both pretty solid. I mean, they're not awakening good. They didn't come in and just absolutely blow open the league. But for rookies of their first event, they didn't do bad. And, like, they didn't do the worst on their team. Then yeah, I think that's a small victory. I think they're going to build more confidence as we get closer to champs, and hopefully Optic turns something around. I'm not sure what it is. I think they got rid of the wrong original Optic player, if we're going to call him that. Should have probably gotten rid of TJ Haley and try to keep Dashy on as much as possible. Although I believe that it was something personal that Dashy just decided he didn't want to play COD anymore. I mean, I
He
don't
didn't
know.
want to play this game
Yeah,
anymore,
this game
probably is more
anymore.
specifically, but yeah.
Which, I mean, it's fine and everything. Like I said, dramatic kids being dramatic kids. Like, I don't want to go back into that spiel again. But I think that a lot of this stems from COVID and all that drama that goes along with that. but we'll see. I really do think that Optic has a good chance of beating Toronto here, and I think they have a chance of like turning around. I don't know how like I'm gonna do my brackets bit by bit this time instead of going full swing, but I do think that Optic could make a run this week. Do I think it's necessary? No. I mean, still don't think it'll mean too much,
I
but
mean, with their group, it's not like, do you mean and make a run like make it to a semifinals or make it to a finals? Because that's kind of a big
I think
jump
making
in
it to a
difference.
semis is realistic here. Making it to a finals in this
Because
group would be
making it to a
difficult.
semifinals isn't realistically all that difficult for them. They got Chicago in their pool, and with them, Seattle and Toronto. The only team that they realistically should like 95% lose to is Chicago. Seattle, OG, we saw them beat them just the event prior. And Toronto, that's going to be kind of that contested matchup. So, all right, I'll take all the moment of silence as you not having anything else to add.
No,
I don't
I,
have
I
anything else
literally
to
don't have
add.
anything else to add. I went
It's
on a
going to be a
rambling event
very,
about Optic for a long time, and I think that I don't really have anything to add for Toronto, seeing as
yeah,
they haven't changed anything and they look
it's just
fine.
going to be a straight up competitive series between two teams fighting for that eighth place spot to ensure that they start in the winner's bracket at champs, which is incredibly important for these teams. So
Right.
after that, our first Group B matchup is going to be Atlanta versus Minnesota. I got Atlanta 3-1. You got Atlanta 3-2. Minnesota's just been on such a decline, even with like how poor Atlanta looked at kind of the events prior. Like realistically, Atlanta has not looked that great, even though they are making it to semifinals and finals consistently. Still, it's been by the skin of their teeth.
Right.
And so I could see this going 3-2 to Atlanta if we see improvement from Minnesota, but we simply haven't. And I don't think it's going to come this event. And it's kind of like, do they want to show that improvement as well? Like in my mind, it's like, does Minnesota want to show that improvement this event? It does. There is some meaning to like getting that fifth place spot and not being in seventh, but I don't. I honestly don't really know. Kind of like if it's a big enough benefit
I don't think it's a
to,
big enough benefit. I think top four gets the big benefit, and everybody else is kind of whatever.
yeah. It's kind of like top two is ideal for a lot of these teams. Top four is good, but like no other teams can make top four that aren't already in the top four. So no teams are going for that. So you got Chicago, you got Atlanta, Florida, and Dallas all fighting for that top two spot so they can start in winners semis, and then have Toronto and OGLA kind of fighting to ensure that they get that eighth place spot so they start in winners. Those are kind of like the really important storylines, I guess, for this event. But we both got Atlanta winning it, so I guess the points mute or whatever.
Right.
Moving on to the Dallas versus Florida rematch that we will see in Group B. We're both going Dallas 3-1 over Florida. It's only been a week difference. There's not much you can improve on in a week. Florida, they really probably do want to win this Dallas matchup though, so they can get that top two spot, because I you would have thought they would have kind of actually really tried that past event, because it would have been a lot easier for them to make it to a finals and get some more points. But with Dallas, like getting that in the standings right now, Dallas is in second, only 10 points behind Atlanta too. So you got Atlanta at 250 points, Dallas at 240, and then you got Florida and Chicago both at 220.
Right.
And Chicago's got a lot easier of a group. Yeah, that may only get them to third place, passing the Florida Buccaneers, but
There's
yeah,
a
Florida, they might have
small
not
chance
wanted
for
to
movement.
slack off during that last event if that's what
I
they were
think.
doing.
I mean, when they slack off and they still make it to the semis, like, and they get clapped by a team who had literally all the momentum in the world. I've never seen a team with more momentum in my life. I think that's a win, and I think that they're going to be able to hold a pretty decent spot. Like I said, none of it. I mean, it's all matters a little, but not anything too crazy when we talk about going into champs.
Yeah, I do truly think that that top 2 spot is, though. That's such a huge jump starting all the way in winter semis because you only have to win 3 games or 3 matches to be the CDL champs. So
Right.
it's a lot smaller of a journey to that $1.5 million as a team. But yeah, we're both agreeing it's just such a short amount of time in between. Maybe this event we see Dallas go back to back. I mean, that's kind of when Florida did it. It was when there was a week, just 1 week. There was an event, excuse me, just 1 week after they had won. So this might be the event Dallas goes back to back, especially if they kind of continue the strong performance that we did see from them at that London homestand event. But both agreeing Dallas taking this over Florida 3-1. Moving on to our Saturday matchups, our first one in Group A winners, we got Chicago. I got Chicago versus Toronto. You're going to have Chicago versus OGLA. And I'm going to have Chicago take this 3-2 over Toronto. Actually, I'm going to say 3-1. I don't know. Something about Toronto and Chicago just makes me think it's going to go 3-2. Toronto's been that team that's kind of been able to extend these series out just repetitively throughout the entire season. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it goes to a game 5, but in the end, I'm still going to take Chicago, even though they haven't been looking that great in their scrims. But huge difference between scrims and the actual tournament, as we have seen from kind of Minnesota.
Right.
But who do you have coming out in your Group A winners, Chicago or OGLA?
That was a great question. So, Group A winners out of Chicago and OGLA, I really do think that you're probably going to see Chicago come out on top pretty easily there. I think that Optic is still not on the same level as Chicago, and I don't think that they're going to carry momentum. If they win here, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, but I feel like they have a long way to go before they start to like peel off pretty easy victories against Chicago in my eyes. So, like I said, it could happen, but I'm gonna go with 3-1 over Chicago, or sorry, 3-1 over Optic for Chicago.
Okay. Moving on to our Group B winners matchup, we both have Atlanta versus Dallas. I'm going to give it to Dallas 3-1 over Atlanta. Kind of the way I'm feeling for this event, I think Dallas is just going to keep on steamrolling right ahead. And I think, honestly, I could see Dallas going back to back this weekend. So to do that, I am going to have them winning over the Atlanta FaZe. I see you taking Atlanta over Dallas in that game 5. And with Dallas's record in game 5s, I would agree with you if it does go to a game 5. Atlanta's probably going to take it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty simple math. Dallas is still not as good as Atlanta at game fives, and I really do think that Atlanta is going to go the distance with Dallas here. I think it's more of a I think Atlanta has more plays under their sleeve than Dallas, so they're able to kind of give away more prior to champs than Dallas can. Dallas is not going to be able to keep up with that, in my eyes at least.
Moving on to our Group A losers round 1, I have Seattle versus OGLA. You have Seattle versus Toronto. I'm giving it to OGLA 3-1, and you're
I'm
giving
giving
it
it to
3-1
Toronto.
for
I
Toronto.
Seattle's hopeless. I don't even want to talk about Seattle anymore. There's 11 teams in the Call of Duty League, so
I would say there's 10 teams. We don't need to talk about LAG since they're already guaranteed 12th. So there's only 10 teams of
10
importance
teams.
in the CDL right now. And 2 of those are Florida and Minnesota, who are in our Group B losers round 1. And we're both going to give this to Florida. I'm giving it to Florida 3-2 over Minnesota. You're giving it to Florida 3-1 over Minnesota. Not too much to really say there. I mean, as the seasons wind down, Minnesota's just not performing. Florida has, outside of the poor performance that we saw from them kind of last weekend. However, they still made it to a semifinals. They lost to Dallas, and they lost to London in a game 5. So they didn't look terrible. They just didn't look as crazily dominant as they have been. So
I mean, I definitely don't think that Minnesota is going to give too much of a fight, but I do think that they're at least a respectable team. Like you have to go in there knowing like, hey, by the way, like we have to try. You know, I still think Florida's probably got it. Florida still looks really consistently good despite everything that happened, and hopefully this last tournament the London home series was kind of like a kick in the ass. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I don't want to like try and fall into recency bias, but however, when events are so close together, you have to go by what occurred most recently.
Right.
So if I was saying, oh, who's the best team in the game right now, like maybe my answer would be a bit different, but or who's been the best team throughout the whole year or whatever, my answer would be a bit different. But for this event specifically, that's kind of like the most recent kind of event that I have to go off of was that London homestand event. So that is going to kind of play a big role in decisions I make in my predictions for this one. But moving on to our Group A losers round 2, I have Toronto versus OGLA, as do you. It's going to be that rematch, and this time around, I'm going to give it to OGLA 3-2 over the Toronto Ultra. As you're going to give the rematch to OGLA once again over the Toronto Ultra.
Yes,
3-2.
I am. I feel like Optic is one of those teams that does better in the rematch. You know, I would love to see them play a team for a third time in a series because it'd be interesting to see what the rubber match looks like. But they've been pretty good at picking up things near the end, so I would imagine that they'll pick up on some things. Obviously, there'll be some improvement here or there, but from there, like it'll be up to them to kind of flesh out Toronto and get a good feel for how the event's going for Toronto as well. Hopefully they get a couple good looks at them. I would imagine that this is a pretty likely scenario. They play them twice, seeing how both of them are decent enough, and I wouldn't put it past it for this to be a realistic scenario.
Yep. Moving on to our Group B losers round 2, I have Atlanta versus Florida. You have Dallas for Florida. And I would kind of like to give it to Florida because either way I look at it, any team that comes out of this group, unless it's Minnesota, the semifinals versus Chicago is going to be very fun. You're going to have Chicago Dallas, Chicago Atlanta, or Chicago Florida. And I would love to see a Chicago Florida matchup here since it's been a blowout for Florida kind of every single time these teams have matched up throughout the season. However, this is probably kind of looking at like that past event, the weakest that we've seen this new Florida roster looking. So it'd be kind of maybe we can get a really good competitive series here between Chicago and Florida finally. But maybe we can see a really good competitive series between Atlanta and Chicago because a 3-0 is no fun when you get these matchups that you want. But
Oh yeah, no,
in
for
the end,
sure.
I'm going to give it to Atlanta over Florida, even though the prior times they've been kind of blown out by this Florida Mutineers lineup. I think this time around, I'm going to give the edge to this Atlanta squad. I don't really have too much of a reason as to
I
why.
totally get it. And I mean, at this point, like it's going to be a lot more difficult to determine what our matchups are going to be because I feel like every team right here is going to be concealing their like true form, perhaps in champs. Like I just think that it's going to be you should expect to not see anything repeated at champs from either any of these teams. You know, the search strats especially. Whatever they're running this week, they most certainly won't be running for champs because I do think that Call of Duty falls under some decent recency bias. Let's see. So for mine, Atlanta. We're on this one, right? Atlanta and shoot Optic.
You're giving it to Dallas over Florida. The Group B losers round
Oh,
two
sorry,
was
Group B losers round 2.
yep. Yeah, you have
So
Dallas over Florida 3-1.
yeah, my bad. You got ahead of yourself. You don't do that.
Yeah, I don't usually do that,
Don't
but I
usually
did
do
this
that.
time.
So yeah, I think I don't know. My Dallas, Florida, giving it 3-1 over them. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
But
like it's
we'll
it's
see.
just kind of gonna come down to what teams want to put importance on how much teams want to put an importance on this event to get a good seeding at champs. Because Dallas and Atlanta, they're just trying to maintain their position right now. Like it doesn't matter too much if you're first or if you're second. Obviously, you'd like to be the overall first team, or I get you would like that first ranking just to be like, hey, we're the number one team in the CDL at the end of the regular season or whatever. Like that's nice to say. But
Right.
for seeding at champs, it doesn't really matter too much. So they're kind of just trying to maintain it. Meanwhile, Florida and Chicago, they're trying to get into that top 2 position. I mean, the Chicago Huntsmen, I think they're going to be taking this event pretty serious. As I mean, Scump has said, this is the most important event outside of champs of the season for us, so we can try and get that top 2 position.
I imagine that Chicago's going to try really hard, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, uh, it is Dallas, and I think that Dallas is hot right now. I think Dallas is looking. I mean, they have an MVP, like the first MVP candidate that came out was Shotzi. They've been consistently performing, you know, flawlessly recently, but in earlier dates, you still had a very, very solid roster with a lot of it. They have had zero roster changes, which is a rarity now in CDL, and they felt comfortable playing together the whole time. I wonder what the
Yeah,
number
I
is for
mean, the two
rosters.
teams that haven't had a roster change, well, there's
Atlanta and Dallas,
3:
right?
Atlanta,
And
Dallas, and Minnesota, and Paris. None of those teams have made a roster change. I mean, you
Paris.
you could say Toronto hasn't made a roster change because they haven't made a roster change. They've just changed around their starting lineup.
I mean,
But
I think that in itself is a roster change.
yeah, that in itself, it's at least some type of change. The teams that haven't made any change since the start of the season have been Atlanta FaZe, Dallas Empire, Minnesota Rocker, and the Paris Legion. And the Atlanta FaZe and the Dallas Empire right now are currently the top 2 teams in the CDL, at least point wise. Probably one can make an argument skill wise as well. But all right, do you have anything else you'd like to add about your Dallas Florida matchup?
No,
Okay,
not at all.
I'm going to move on to the semifinal then, which I'm going to have Chicago versus Atlanta. You're going to have Chicago versus
Versus
Dallas.
Dallas.
I'm going to have Chicago take this over Atlanta
Really?
3-2. I am. I think Atlanta, we saw it at the last event Atlanta played at. They were playing a lot of the maps that they have either never played on or are a lot weaker on. And so I think Atlanta's just using these last events in the year to grasp a feel of kind of how teams are going to try and play, or what they need to work on certain maps leading into champs. And unless Chicago Huntsmen win this event, I think Atlanta is guaranteed at least second place because of the tiebreaker and how that works. Because unless Chicago wins this event, meaning they get 50 points, putting that at 270 points, they won't pass up Atlanta, because the most they can get by making it to a final is 30 points. So that would only put them at 250. And I'm pretty sure Atlanta wins the tiebreaker there, if either it goes to map win percentage or game win percentage. Atlanta FaZe has Chicago beat on both of those. So that's why I'm going to give it to the Chicago Huntsmen. I think the Chicago Huntsmen are putting a lot more stock into this event than the Atlanta FaZe might be. And for that reason, I'm going to give it to Chicago 3-2 over the Atlanta FaZe in this semifinal.
Okay. I mean, it'd be pretty interesting for sure. I don't see it happening, but it'd be pretty interesting.
All right, you have the Dallas Empire taking it over Chicago
Yeah.
3-1. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
even know if you need to make an argument
no,
there.
I'm not even gonna try to make an argument there. I mean, it's plain and simple. Like I gave it 3-1 just because I felt generous. I was like maybe Optic can or not Optic, well old Optic. I felt maybe Chicago could pull off a Dom or something like that. I don't know. Dallas is pretty good at Dom, but
Yeah,
you
I
never
mean, at the
know. Like
beginning of the season, we would have said, yeah, Chicago 3-1 over Dallas.
yeah,
But
but
my, how the tables have turned.
those Dallas Empire routers, man, it's the best thing since sliced bread.
All right, so I got Chicago making a final. You got Chicago losing there because they're facing up against Dallas. That's a result of kind of how our earlier predictions occurred throughout the weekend. Moving on to our second semifinal, I got Dallas versus OGLA, and you have Atlanta versus OGLA. Both of us agree OGLA gonna lose 3-1 to their opposition. I don't think we really need to make an argument to defend ourselves there. That just kind of makes sense if you've been watching the CDL at all.
Right. I
So
mean, like if you've been watching it all, you'll know that Optic can't compete against. Like we have three of the powerhouse teams here. Two of them are legitimate contenders. Like Dallas and Atlanta are both probably favorites for COD champs. If I was doing Vegas odds or anything, I would bet on Atlanta or Dallas winning COD champs. And Optic, I would give them really, 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 really like crazy odds for them to win COD champs. Just how I see it, you know. Honestly, that's something that we should consider is like we should look into the odds on matchups because now they're starting to do that. I don't know if anybody here knows that, but or anybody listening knows that, but they do sports betting or esports betting for Call of Duty, and it is really kind of fascinating to see where Vegas's mind is at with how things are shaping up and statistics and all that stuff because that's what drives all of their betting is statistically what's most likely to happen. It'd be kind of interesting to see that versus our predictions. See how many times we win versus Vegas too.
Yeah, I mean, if my record, well, I haven't bet in Vegas yet, but
Right.
if any of my poker nights with my buddies is any indication, I would be really bad. So probably don't take my advice
Nick,
in
you
betting,
want to
but I
come?
feel
You want
like
to come
my
play some
predictions are
poker?
pretty solid.
You want to come play some poker?
No, no, I don't. I do not want to play some poker. My one crowning achievement in cards is when I was playing it at the lunch table, I was playing hearts. If anyone knows how to play hearts, I was playing hearts with my friends at the lunch table. And I looked at my hand. I said, I'm going to shoot the moon this turn. And they all laughed at me. And then about 5 cards in, they were like, wait, he's actually going to do it. And then they all tried to stop me, but I succeeded in shooting the moon in. That's my crowning accomplishment in cards. But we're not talking about cards. We're talking about Call of Duty. That's what we got going on this weekend. And in the grand finals, for me, my predictions probably wrong. Most definitely wrong. I
Most
haven't been
definitely
100%
wrong.
correct this entire season. I have Chicago versus Dallas. I'm looking at your semifinal Chicago versus Dallas matchup. I think I'm agreeing with you there. So I'm going to say Dallas 3-1 in the finals. I do not realistically see Chicago being able to take the current form that we're seeing out of this Dallas lineup. And you are going to have the Atlanta FaZe versus the Dallas Empire, with Atlanta taking that 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, I had it earlier in the Group B winners,
Oh, yeah,
and
you
I,
did.
I think I think that if it goes to Game 5, I'm pretty confident that Atlanta can pull
Two
it
game
together.
fives, though. Dallas is going to lose 2 game 5s against Atlanta at the same tournament.
It's stranger things have happened. I will tell you that stranger things have happened.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Paris made a final last weekend, so
Yeah, see, the world's coming to an end because Paris Legion made a final at the London home series.
I think the world be coming to an end if the Seattle Surge made a final. But yeah, it's still quite scary that Paris made a final. But you're going to go with Atlanta over Dallas 3-2.
Yeah, I'm going with Atlanta twice.
Okay. All right. Just double checking.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize you were even questioning that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So there are
I'm
our
right.
predictions.
Damn it.
I'm having Dallas win it this last event.
He's
Kevin
crazy.
is having Atlanta win it.
He,
If that is how it occurs,
not crazy.
then we're going to see Atlanta end out the season in first place with Dallas in second, followed by the Florida Mutineers and the Chicago Huntsmen. And then rounding it out, it would be New York Subliners, London, Minnesota. Optic would claim that 8th place spot if our predictions go as we plan them to, or as we predict them to. If our predictions go as we predicted them, Optic
Yeah.
will end the season in 8th. Then we would have the Paris Legion in 9th, Toronto Ultra, and then Seattle and Gorillas rounding it out. So
Woo.
there you have it. It is going to be the last homestand event of the season. I hope you all enjoy it. We'll be back the week after to discuss that event. We're not going to go into our champs predictions. We're going to save that for shortly after, probably 2 weeks afterwards. So kind of leading up to champs, we'll release that a bit closer, so there's not as much gap in the episode. So next week's episode should be pretty short, unless some crazy stuff happens and we have a really long rant to talk
Again.
about some type of topic.
Again.
Hopefully everything goes flawlessly, but
No, it won't.
hope you guys all have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Later.